There is something mysterious about the encounters that transform our soul. Sometimes, the presence of someone pierces us with such intensity that deep in our chest, we feel it cannot be mere chance. And when the universe chooses someone to cross our path, the signs do not simply appear, they remain. It doesn't matter how much time passes, how far that person is, or how many turns life takes. There is a connection that resists time, ego, and even logic itself. According to Carl Jung, these profound bonds are rooted in the collective unconscious and guide us back to forgotten parts of ourselves. Have you ever felt that someone was placed in your life for a greater reason? That certain encounters carry an invisible, almost sacred purpose? Then stay until the end and discover how to recognize the signs that never fade. Comment below, I trust the wisdom of the universe. When we talk about connections that feel destined, it's impossible to ignore Carl Jung's teachings. For him, nothing that happens in our lives is purely accidental. There is an invisible fabric linking external events to the inner movements of the psyche. Jung called this synchronicity, events that, while not causally related, hold deep symbolic meaning. When someone enters your life unexpectedly and sparks an inner awakening, we are in the presence of one of these moments. These profound connections are often catalysts of the individuation process, the soul's path toward wholeness. Through the relationship with the other, we are led to confront hidden aspects of ourselves, especially the shadow, everything that was repressed or rejected throughout life. If this person awakens both the best and the worst in you, it is because they touch parts of your psyche that need to be seen, understood, and integrated. In addition, the inner archetypes of the feminine and masculine, anima and animus, are also activated in these encounters. The other becomes a mirror of our soul, bringing out both our idealized projections and our deepest fears. And it is within this mirror that true transformation occurs. If the universe truly chose someone for you, this person will be a reflection of your evolutionary path, not just a source of emotional comfort. The signs they leave behind are not fleeting. They mark the journey of your consciousness toward integration. In Carl Jung's view, synchronicity is more than coincidence. It is the manifestation of a meaningful pattern between external events and inner states of the psyche. When applied to relationships, this idea becomes especially powerful. Those encounters that seem random but provoke deep transformation or an immediate recognition are often expressions of this symbolic language of the collective unconscious. It's no surprise that many people report meeting someone at the right time or when they least expected. Jung would say the soul was ready to receive that encounter as part of its own process of maturation. These encounters do not follow linear logic. They arrive filled with symbolism, as if the universe were arranging the right elements to guide you to the next stage of your psychic development. When two people meet during a moment of vulnerability, openness, or even crisis, a fertile ground is created for a connection that transcends the ordinary. Synchronicity in this context serves as an invitation. Look closely, there is something here your soul needs to experience. These signs that do not disappear, the persistent memory of someone, the feeling that an invisible bond keeps the connection alive even as time passes, are aspects of this synchrony that continues to operate on subtle levels. You may try to forget, rationalize, move on, but something remains alive, active within the psychic field. This does not necessarily mean that this person will be your lifelong companion, but rather that they hold a symbolic place in your journey of self-discovery. Perhaps they embodied an important archetype, a key to opening a portal within you that had been locked for a long time. These synchronous encounters also have an essential function: to challenge the ego. The ego seeks safety, repetition, control. The self, the center of the psyche's wholeness according to Jung, seeks expansion, truth, and integration. When someone appears and disrupts our internal structures, pulls us out of our comfort zone, and awakens intense emotions, we are faced with a force that goes beyond mere desire or attraction. It is the self calling us to grow. Through the other, we see our deepest desires, our wounds, and also our potential. The universe then becomes a living mirror of what the soul needs to see in order to evolve. It is important to remember that synchronicity does not guarantee a happy ending in romantic terms. It guarantees purpose. A relationship marked by synchronicity may last a lifetime or just a few days, but its imprint will be eternal. This is because it touched a deep layer of the psyche, triggering inner processes that might never have been awakened otherwise. The synchronous person acts as a catalyst for a new stage of existence, and often, this awakening is only possible because that specific soul touched yours. That is why, when we talk about signs that don't disappear, we are speaking of the symbolic permanence of someone in your inner life. This permanence is not a mistake, nor a punishment, but a reverberation of what was transformed within you. Even if the relationship never materialized or has ended, it fulfilled its role in the greater narrative of your individuation. So when you feel that someone has been placed on your path by something greater, observe. Notice how this person entered, what they awakened in you, the dreams that appeared, the symbols that began to surround you. None of this is random. The soul speaks through images, emotions, patterns, and encounters. Synchronicity in this sense is a letter written by the unconscious and delivered by the universe, and those who are attentive know when something like this happens. You don't need to understand everything right away, but if something vibrates within you when remembering someone, if there are signs that continue to echo over time, perhaps it is time to listen more deeply to what your soul is trying to say. In the deepest relationships, we don't fall in love only with the other person. We fall in love with what we project onto them. Carl Jung stated that projection is one of the most common and inevitable mechanisms of the psyche. Everything we don't recognize in ourselves is cast onto the other. Thus, what we love or hate intensely in someone may actually be a reflection of unintegrated parts of ourselves. This process intensifies when we are faced with a connection that feels chosen by the universe, because the more significant the relationship, the more it activates unconscious material. The shadow, as Jung defined it, represents the set of repressed aspects of the personality, characteristics that, for various reasons, were excluded from consciousness. They may be negative traits, like envy or anger, but also positive ones, like strength, sensuality, or creativity. When we meet someone who seems to ignite something in us, we are very often looking at a mirror of our own shadow. We feel enchantment, fear, repulsion, or fascination because that person manifests directly or indirectly parts of us that were forgotten or denied. This is why meaningful relationships are also challenging. The other person is not only out there, they are revealing something that is in here. And the more we resist looking at it, the more intense the dynamic becomes. Sometimes we idealize the other, put them on a pedestal, believe they are the key to our happiness. But what we are actually doing is seeing in them qualities we cannot yet recognize in ourselves. Similarly, when criticizing or rejecting certain attitudes, we may be reacting to something we do not accept in our own personality. These deep bonds, chosen by life to transform us, have a psychic function, to bring repressed content to the surface so we can integrate it and become more whole. Passion, conflict, doubt, and desire are symbolic expressions of this tension between conscious and unconscious. The other shows us who we are, not with words, but with the impact they cause in our soul. When we lack awareness of this process, we remain trapped in cycles of illusion, frustration, or dependency. We believe the other is responsible for our emotions, when in fact, they only awakened what was already within us. Projection, therefore, can be seen as a call to self-reflection. What is this person showing me about myself? This question, though simple, opens deep portals of self-knowledge. It demands courage, for looking at the shadow is uncomfortable, challenging, but also liberating. It is important to remember that projection is not a mistake, but a stage in psychological maturation. We all project. The problem is not in projecting, but in remaining unconscious of it. When we recognize that we are projecting, we can begin to reclaim those fragments of the soul, embracing the forgotten pieces of our being. And in this process, the other ceases to be an idol or a villain and becomes a companion on the journey, someone who, even unknowingly, has collaborated with our process of integration. In truly meaningful encounters, this exchange is mutual. Both are mirrors of each other, and the relationship becomes an alchemical field where shadows are exposed so they can be illuminated. That is why many of these bonds bring both pain and growth at once. They are not only about romantic love, They are archetypal experiences that propel individuation. The pain we feel is not only about the absence of the other, but about the disconnection from parts of ourselves they represented. When someone leaves an indelible mark on our story, it is likely because they carried symbols of our unrecognized shadow. Even if the relationship does not materialize outwardly, it can become one of the most transformative forces of our inner life. By integrating these projections, we reclaim power, authenticity, and clarity about who we really are. Ultimately, the other is never just the other. They are a living revelation of what still needs to be loved, accepted, and recognized within us. And when the universe chooses someone to be this mirror, it is not only gifting us a bond, it is calling us to healing. In Carl Jung's analytical psychology, every person carries within themselves a psychic counterpart of the opposite gender. The anima, which represents the feminine aspect in the psyche of a man, and the animus, the masculine aspect in the psyche of a woman. These archetypes are not mere personality traits. They are profound forces shaping the way we relate, love, and seek wholeness. When the universe places someone in our path, and that encounter awakens intense feelings of connection and recognition, it is very common that these archetypes are being activated. The anima is not merely an inner feminine figure. She represents everything that, for a man, has been considered outside his masculine ego: sensitivity, intuition, surrender, affection. The animus in a woman symbolizes traits such as rationality, action, firmness, and discernment. Throughout life, the integration of these archetypes is essential for each of us to become whole, not bound to gender stereotypes, but in touch with the totality of being. And it is in deep relationships that this integration becomes inevitable. When we fall in love, we are often not only seeing the other person as they are, but projecting onto them the unconscious image of the anima or animus. This projection creates an aura of magic, a sense that we have found our other half, as if the other completes us absolutely. The feeling that the universe has chosen someone for us can, in many cases, be tied to this inner process of recognizing forgotten or repressed parts of our own soul. These projections, however, cannot sustain themselves forever. Over time, the veil lifts, and we begin to see the other more realistically, and that is when the true work begins. If we can perceive that this emotional intensity was a sign of an inner call to integrate the repressed feminine or masculine, the relationship ceases to be merely romantic and becomes alchemical. Love, then, becomes a psychic laboratory where we learn to welcome within ourselves what we once sought in the other. The true encounter between two people chosen by life does not happen only on the physical or emotional plane. It happens when the inner feminine and masculine begin to dialogue, both within each individual and between the two. When a man comes into contact with his anima, he becomes more empathetic, more sensitive to the nuances of feeling. When a woman integrates her animus, she gains clarity, strength of expression, and the ability to take her place in the world. This dance between inner polarities directly reflects in the quality of the relationship. These archetypal relationships, when lived consciously, become rituals of integration. The other becomes not only a partner, but also a mirror and guide. They show what is missing, what needs balance, what has been forgotten in us. It is not uncommon that after a deep and transformative relationship, the person feels more whole, even if the relationship did not last. This happens because the bond fulfilled its symbolic function, to activate and bring closer the inner poles that had been distant or in conflict. But there is an essential detail in this process. The integration of anima and animus is personal. The other only awakens it, but it is you who must walk the path inward. It is not about molding yourself to the other, but about perceiving what they represent, and from there, working on these aspects internally. Sometimes the universe sends someone to trigger this process, not so that you remain together outwardly, but so that you may become complete within. Relationships chosen by the soul are not easy. They confront, destabilize, and reveal. But they also heal, elevate, and open doors to a deeper love, the one born from the union between the masculine and feminine within us. And when this union happens, we stop seeking in the other what we lack and begin to love with freedom, presence, and truth. The integration of anima and animus transforms how we relate. We no longer love to fill a void, but to share fullness. And when this level of love is reached, It does not disappear because it does not depend on time, physical presence, or external validation. It remains as an echo of the soul that finally recognized itself in the mirror of the other. Individuation, according to Carl Jung, is the process by which a person becomes what they are in essence. A path of self-knowledge, integration, and inner realization. It is not a fixed destination, but a continuous journey of approaching the self, the deepest and truest core of the psyche. And although it is by nature a personal journey, there are encounters that awaken it so intensely that they become an essential part of it. When the universe seems to have chosen someone to cross your path, it is common that this person activates dormant aspects of your soul, marking the beginning of a shared, even if silent, process of individuation. Not every relationship is a call to individuation. Many serve comfort, habit, or escape, but there are connections that, from the start, carry a symbolic weight. They do not follow predictable scripts. They challenge, confuse, enchant, and above all, they transform. The presence of the other works as a mirror, revealing not only who we are but also what we can become. Instead of distracting us from ourselves, these relationships push us deeper within. It is in this descent that true individuation begins. The other awakens parts of us that had been forgotten, talents, fears, desires, wounds. As the bond deepens, so too does the need to face the shadow, integrate our inner polarities, and free ourselves from social masks. There is something profoundly sacred in this type of encounter, because it is not limited to romantic feelings. It returns us to ourselves, forces us to grow, to mature emotionally, and to take responsibility for who we are and for what we project. This process, however, is not comfortable. Individuation as a couple requires courage. The relationship becomes a field where the ego is constantly challenged. Idealizations fall, fantasies are confronted, expectations collapse. And still, something persists. There is a greater force sustaining the bond, something that cannot be explained rationally, but insists on remaining. When there is true love, not as a desire for possession, but as a profound acceptance of the other and of oneself, the relationship becomes a catalyst for spiritual awakening. It is important to understand that the other is not responsible for your individuation. They are only the trigger. The true transformation happens when you take ownership of what was revealed through the relationship. When you stop blaming, waiting, demanding. When you understand that everything the other activated is, in truth, within you. The anger you feel, the love that overflows, the pain that burns, all are expressions of your own soul crying out for integration. Sometimes the relationship ends, and yet the journey continues. This does not mean failure. On the contrary, it may be a sign that the symbolic mission of that encounter was fulfilled. The other played their role to trigger your individuation. They made you see your light and your darkness, your strength and your fragility. Even in their absence, their presence remains alive, not as dependence but as momentum. True love does not bind, it sets free. And when both accept this path, even with all the pain and beauty it demands, the relationship can become a space of mutual expansion. It is no longer about seeking in the other the missing half, but about walking side by side as whole beings, aware of their shadows and lights. The relationship becomes fertile because it is rooted in truth, not illusion. There is depth, respect, surrender, and above all, space for each one to flourish without suffocating the other. Individuation as a couple is not perfect. It is alive, real, imperfect, and human. It is made of meetings and separations, silences and revelations. But when born of a connection carrying the symbolic seal of destiny, it leaves marks that do not fade. Because more than sharing a life, these relationships return us to our essence. And even if life follows different paths, there is something that never gets lost. The fact that that encounter forever changed the way you see yourself. And that is the greatest proof it was real, necessary, and chosen, not by chance, but by the deep wisdom woven into all that is truly meaningful. Certain encounters do not follow the logic of time or reason. They are stitched in the invisible, where the soul recognizes something the ego does not yet understand. When the universe chooses someone to cross your path, it is not merely offering a relationship. It is handing you a mirror, a challenge, an opportunity to awaken. The presence of the other triggers deep memories, activates inner forces, and invites transformation. Love at this level ceases to be an end in itself and becomes a means for individuation. Those signs that never disappear, the vivid memories, the sense of connection beyond matter, the silent learnings, are echoes of this symbolic journey. They are clues left by the soul so that you don't forget yourself, for in the end, the true purpose of these encounters is not to keep the other, but to rediscover yourself. If this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every piece of content is an invitation to consciousness, self-love, and inner expansion. And don't forget to watch the video now appearing on your screen. It is the continuation of this journey that has already begun within you.